All right, welcome back to the deep dive. So, as we all know, this weekend we're springing forward once again. So we figured it's the perfect time to do a deep dive into that constantly swirling debate around daylight saving time. Is it finally, time to ditch the switch, or are we just going to be stuck with this kind of time-bending tradition forever?
Yeah, it's really fascinating how, a seemingly so simple clock change can just spark these like really complex discussions. Yeah.
I know, right? And we've got some really interesting stuff to cover today. We've got this Frubs article that highlights Trump's kind of flip-flopping stance on DST. Plus, we'll dive into some historical context and look at some arguments for and against it. And we'll definitely touch on that Elon Musk X poll that had everyone buzzing, a couple weeks back.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack. I mean, what strikes me is that with all this talk, very little actually changes. I mean, look at the Sunshine Protection Act. It passed the Senate in 2022, but then completely stalled in the House. Why do you think that is?
That's a great question. I think it probably just reflects, like how deep the divisions are surrounding DST. Even in this Forbes piece, it mentions that Trump is now calling ending DST a 50-50 issue. But this comes after, back in December, he posts on Truth Social and seems way more adamant about eliminating it.
Yeah, it's a pretty big shift in tone for sure. It really makes you wonder what's behind that more hesitant stance now, I mean, could it be that he's sensing that the public isn't quite as united on the issue as he initially thought?
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, especially when you look at that X poll that Musk put out, 58.1% said they preferred an hour later if DST were canceled, and 41.9% said they would prefer an hour earlier. So not exactly a landslide either way, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that split, it kind of mirrors what Trump himself said in the article. He said that some people want more light in the morning and others want it in the evening. And this whole back and forth has been going on pretty much since DST was first implemented back in 1918, it was initially as a wartime energy saving measure.
And then shortly after that, it was repealed, only to be reinstated nationwide in 1966. So, yeah, it really seems like we've been kind of grappling with the pros and cons ever since. Speaking of which, maybe we should dive into those, huh? On the pro side, people often point to the fact that, there's more daylight hours after work, potentially leading to more outdoor activity and just like an overall better quality of life.
Yeah, there's definitely something to be said for those long summer evenings.
Yeah.
I mean, it really does feel like you just have more time to enjoy the day.
Right.
But is that feeling really enough to outweigh the potential downsides?
Well, that's where the debate gets really interesting, right? Because on the con side, we've got the American Medical Association citing studies that link DST to increased heart problems.
Yeah.
And car crashes and even mood disorders.
Yeah, and that goes way beyond just feeling a little bit groggy, disrupting our circadian rhythms, like our internal sleep-wake cycles. It can have some really significant consequences for our health and well-being. We're talking things like sleep debt and social jet lag, which can accumulate over time.
Yeah, that's a little concerning. It makes you wonder if that extra hour of daylight is really worth the potential risk. And it's not like the energy saving argument is a slam dunk either.
You're right. The data on that is actually pretty mixed. Some studies show a slight decrease in energy consumption, but others have found no significant impact at all.
So if the benefits are debatable and the risks are potentially significant, then why do we even bother with DST? Is it just tradition at this point?
It's a question worth asking for sure. I mean, I think the fact that the Sunshine Protection Act stalled in the House suggests that even lawmakers are, they're struggling to find a solution that satisfies everyone.
It's a complicated issue for sure, but maybe we can try to break down, the arguments for each side a bit further. What are some of the specific points that people make in favor of making DST permanent?
Well, aside from, those perceived benefits to quality of life from having those extended daylight hours, proponents of permanent DST also often cite potential economic benefits. Like, for example, they argue that it could boost tourism and recreation industries.
Yeah, I mean, more people out and about in the evenings, it could definitely lead to more spending, right? But do we actually have, hard data to support that claim?
Well, that's where it gets a little tricky. I mean, there are studies out there suggesting a potential for increased retail sales and reduced crime rates during DST, but the findings aren't always, totally conclusive.
So it's more of a correlation than a causation kind of situation. Makes sense. But I mean, even if, the economic benefits are kind of uncertain, wouldn't more daylight hours still be a big win for businesses that really rely on those outdoor activities?
Oh, yeah. It's definitely a huge factor to consider. Think about it. Restaurants with patios, amusement parks, golf courses. I mean, all those kinds of businesses could definitely see a boost. But again, it's not like a guaranteed outcome. You know what I mean?
Right, right. Other factors definitely play a role too, like weather, consumer spending habits. It's a super complex equation. Okay, so we've explored the potential upsides of permanent DST, both, economic and in terms of like perceived quality of life. But what about the other side of the coin? What are the arguments in favor of sticking with permanent standard time?
Well, for a lot of proponents of standard time, the primary concern is health. They argue that aligning our clocks with the natural rising and setting of the sun is it's more in tune with our biological rhythms, and
Yeah.
that leads to better sleep, improved mood, and just an overall reduced risk of all those health problems that we were just talking about.
So it's all about working with our natural sleep-wake cycles rather than trying to like constantly fight against them.
Exactly. And there's actually a growing body of research that supports this view. I mean, studies have shown that even like small disruptions to our circadian rhythms can have a really negative impact on our physical and mental well-being.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, our bodies weren't designed to constantly adjust to these, these artificial time shifts. But isn't there a concern that sticking with standard time year round, like, would that mean we'd be sacrificing those long summer evenings that people enjoy so much?
Oh, that's a valid point for sure. There's definitely a trade-off to consider.
Yeah.
It's really a question of, what are we prioritizing? Do we prioritize the potential health benefits of aligning with, with the natural light patterns, or do we go with the perceived quality of life benefits of having more daylight hours for those leisure activities?
It's like, it's like choosing between a healthy salad and a delicious but not so healthy dessert, right? I mean, both have their appeal. But ultimately, it just comes down to what you value most. And I imagine that differs from person to person.
Oh, absolutely. Individual preferences play a big role here. I mean, some people just thrive on those early mornings and are perfectly content with those shorter days, while others really feel more energized and productive in the evenings and really, really dread those early sunsets.
So it's almost like there's no solution that's going to please absolutely everyone. But wouldn't sticking with the status quo with its, twice yearly time changes, wouldn't that be kind of like the worst of both worlds? We'd still be disrupting our sleep patterns, but without any really clear benefit, right?
That's definitely a really strong argument against the current system. I mean, those biannual transitions can be particularly jarring. Especially that spring forward, which is essentially like giving our bodies a mini dose of jet lag.
And yet we keep doing it year after year. Why do you think that is? Is it simply just inertia? Just like a reluctance to change what we're used to? Mm-hmm. Or are there other factors at play here?
I think it's probably a combination of factors. I mean, there's definitely comfort in familiarity, right? Even if that familiarity comes with a few downsides. And then there's also, the whole issue of political will. As we saw with the Sunshine Protection Act, even when there's momentum for change, it could still be incredibly difficult to get everyone on board.
It seems like this whole debate really boils down to a pretty fundamental question. What's the best way to manage our relationship with time? Do we try to just like bend it to our will, or do we try to live in harmony with its natural rhythms?
Wow, that's a really profound way to put it. And I think it's a question that each of us really has to grapple with individually. There's no easy answer. And ultimately, the best solution may vary depending on our own personal circumstances and priorities.
So what advice would you give to our listeners as they kind of navigate this whole complex issue?
Well, I would encourage them to just be mindful of how these time changes are affecting them personally. Mm-hmm. Pay attention to, your sleep patterns, your mood, your energy levels, and really consider what factors are most important to you. Is it health, productivity, leisure time, and so on. Once you have a better understanding of your own needs and preferences, then you can kind of start to form a more informed opinion on what the best approach might be for you.
That's really great advice. It's all about kind of tuning into our own internal clocks and figuring out, what works best for us, and maybe even having some honest conversations with our loved ones about their preferences as well.
Exactly. Yeah. Because ultimately this is a societal issue, and finding a solution that works for the majority is really going to require, it's going to require that open communication and a willingness to compromise.
Mm-hmm. Well said. It seems like we've covered a lot of ground here, from from Trump's wavering stance to the potential health risks and economic implications of of DST. We've really explored the many facets of this whole ongoing debate. But as we wrap up, I'm curious to hear your personal take. If you had the power to decide, would you advocate for permanent standard time, permanent DST, or maybe even something else entirely?
Oh man, that's a really tough one. It's such a balancing act, really, with valid arguments on both sides.
Mm.
If I had to choose, though, I think I'd probably lean towards permanent standard time. Aligning with the natural light patterns just makes sense from like a health and biological standpoint.
Yeah, I can see the logic in that for sure. I mean, it really does seem like the most natural approach, even if it means, giving up those extended summer evenings.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe we'd all adapt.
Yeah.
And find new ways to enjoy those summer months, even without that extra daylight hour. Maybe we'd even be like more motivated to make the most of those precious hours. Which could lead to, like a deeper appreciation for the rhythm of the natural world.
It's an intriguing thought. Maybe instead of fighting against time, we should just embrace its natural flow.
Precisely. And perhaps by doing so, we discover, like a whole new rhythm to our lives, one that's more in sync with our internal clocks and the world around us.
Yeah, it really makes you wonder if this whole DST debate is really just like a symptom of our desire to control time, to like bend it to our will, but maybe the real solution lies in letting go of that control and just accepting the natural ebb and flow of day and night.
Whoa, that's a really powerful insight. It's almost like DST represents our struggle to reconcile our modern, like fast-paced lives with these ancient rhythms of nature.
And maybe, just maybe, by embracing those natural rhythms, we'll find a better balance, for ourselves and for society as a whole.
I think you've really hit on something important here. It's not just about choosing the right time system. It's about examining our relationship with time itself. Are we trying to dominate it? Or can we find a way to coexist harmoniously with it?
That's a huge question worth pondering. And I think it goes way beyond just the DST debate. It touches on so many aspects of our modern lives, from our work schedules to our social commitments, even how we use technology.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that time's a finite resource. And perhaps by being more mindful of its natural flow, we can make more conscious choices about how we spend it.
This deep dive has given me a lot to think about. As we spring forward this weekend, I'll definitely be paying closer attention to how this time change affects me, both physically and mentally. And I'll be thinking about those deeper questions about our relationship with time. How we can find a better balance and what trade-offs we're willing to make to achieve it.
And perhaps, just maybe, this conversation will inspire others to do the same, to reflect on their own experiences with DST, to engage in those thoughtful discussions with friends and family, and to consider what kind of relationship with time they want to cultivate.
Well said. So to our listeners, as you adjust your clocks this weekend, take a moment to consider your own relationship with time. Are you a slave to the clock, or can you find a way to embrace its natural rhythms? It's a question worth pondering for sure. And one that could lead to some really surprising insights about yourself and the world around you.
And who knows, maybe someday we'll find a solution to this whole time-bending puzzle, one that works for everyone. But until then, let's keep those conversations going and continue to explore this complex interplay between time, technology, and our own human nature.
Beautifully put. And as always, thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive. We'll catch you next time for another fascinating exploration of the world around us.